Readers, at the end of this unit, you're going to choose one of your books that you've read to represent. You'll advocate for that book to be one that other teens read, and for that novel to be included in book lists and in curriculum. You'll share what you find most intriguing and powerful about the novels you choose, and you'll nudge others into wanting to read them and learn from them. You'll think about what makes the book you choose so important, what makes it worthy of attention and recognition. Is it the language and imagery that affected you? Is it the characters who will stay with you most? Is it the life lessons, the issues it tackles? And there are other ways to think about these novels too, using critical reading practices that are as contemporary and brilliant as the books themselves. Over this second bend of the unit, that's what we'll dive into, ways to read that will suggest new insights and bring to light new ways these books are powerful and significant. In particular, we'll dive into an exploration of power in these novels. Power isn't always good or always bad, but power is always important in books, in society, and in our lives. We'll start today by doing some preliminary mapping of power across a narrative. We're going to study the beginning of the award winning novel, The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. If you haven't read the novel, you'll want to at some point. It's significant. We're going to watch the first 8 minutes or so of the film version of the novel. As you watch, will you be thinking about power? And here are some critical lenses that may be helpful: power systems and power dynamics. One way power shows itself can be in power dynamics, how characters interact with each other, how power plays out in their relationships. And sometimes you'll see bigger power systems like racism or classism that give or deny power to characters. Look for these in the story. See if you see any interesting power dynamics or power systems showing themselves. I'll give you a bit of background of this text. The main character's name is Star, and the story begins with a flashback to when Star is 9 years old. Her daddy is giving her and her brother a talk. Readers, do you see how I've set up a process page so I can begin to map details that suggest power? I want to make sure that you have your notebooks out and that you can jot in whatever way helps you map power. You might map the same way that I'm doing, or you might use a different system. I'll have you pause after each section of the 3 scenes in the story so you have a moment to jot. I'm going to map mine kind of like EKG, like the emotional timelines you've sometimes made in your notebooks, the ups and the downs of a heart monitor. So I started out with a timeline. I labeled less power at the bottom of my map and more power at the top of my map. And so far, I just have the talk on the map. And then as we view part of the movie, I'll add to my notes. All right, readers, I want you to go back to the lesson platform and listen to the first 2 minutes and 23 seconds of the video, The Hate You Give. You'll stop right after Star's daddy says, "Know your rights," and then come back to this teaching video. All right, readers, you've watched the first 2 minutes and 23 seconds. Now I want you to take a few minutes and jot in your notes. Start your power map, however you want to do that in your notes, and then come back to the teaching video. Readers, you probably noted that the dad teaches his kids to always keep their hands in view on the dashboard so cops don't get nervous. Her dad is teaching Star and her brother a survival lesson about a tragic power system, a system of racism in America in which some people's race can make them vulnerable. Readers, in this next scene, Star introduces us to her neighborhood, Garden Heights, and we learn more about her family. You may notice more power dynamics or power systems. There is one more critical lens that can be helpful, and that is to think about sources of power. Be alert to that as well. Okay, readers, go ahead and go back to the lesson platform. This time you'll watch from 4 minutes and 3 seconds through 5 minutes and 50 seconds, and then come back to this teaching video. All right, readers, you just watched through 5 minutes and 50 seconds of the video, The Hate You Give. You're going to want to add Garden Heights to your timeline to however you're taking notes, and then take a few minutes to jot your thinking, or if you did that while you were watching the video, to review, read through, and add if you need to, and then come back to the teaching video. Readers, I love how closely we are reading and analyzing. You probably picked up on all sorts of tiny details and thoughts about what they suggest about power in this story. You may have noticed the basketball shoes and how those might give Star some status in Garden Heights and maybe some comfort in her high school. Were you struck by Star's family, by how much her parents love each other and how comforting that seems for Star? Or were you struck by Star's neighborhood, Garden Heights, and how that seems to be a huge source of power for her? It gives her community. She seems to know everyone and feel safe there, though she doesn't go to the local high school, which seemed to feel unsafe. All right, readers, this last scene is set at Star's private school, Williamson. I'm sure you'll notice a lot about power and a lot of details will stand out. If you're unsure what to focus on, it's always interesting to think about how a character feels included or excluded. So again, you'll want to start your note page for Williamson, and this time you're going to watch the video from 5 minutes and 50 seconds through 7 minutes, a short clip, and then come back to this teaching lesson. All right, readers, this time you watched through 7 minutes. So go ahead and take a few minutes to jot your notes, what you noticed around the power dynamics and the sources of power, and then come back to this teaching video when you're done. Readers, there was a lot going on there. You might have noticed how different this school feels than the high school in Garden Heights. This school has lots of light and space and calm. The kids are all dressed up in uniforms and they pull up in cars. It's kind of intimidating. And did you notice how Star and her brother fist bump? Her family definitely is a source of power for her, and she seems to thrive from that closeness. I'm hoping you had a lot to say about how Star calls herself Star version 2 at this school. This star takes off her hoodie before she goes in, and she doesn't use slang, even if her white peers do. Or, as Star says, people will think she's ghetto. Oh, and there's the entitlement and privilege of the white boy who cuts right in front of Star, and to avoid a confrontation, she just lets it go. It seems like we not only see how Star is included or excluded, but we also see how she feels she has less or more power. Like she's attending this school and negotiating it, but she feels less powerful here because she doesn't feel she can show all of herself. And did you also notice some themes and motifs that seem to be repeated here, like traditions and clothing being significant, and Star changing her behavior and language? You just did a lot of interesting thinking work, and it's fascinating to see how you might have mapped power differently. I want you to take a moment to add anything to your map and then review what you have, thinking about the different power structures and how you took notes through each of those different scenes. And I also wanted to show you the notes from all three segments of the video put together, the way that I jotted my notes. So you can see that the timeline goes back and forth between, more power and less power, depending on how the different situations progress. Now, this was some pretty brilliant critical reading work. Let's just take a moment to review so you can try this work in your novels as well. So, you started out by focusing on power and you investigate power dynamics, the power that plays out in relationships and power systems, bigger power systems like racism or classism. Then you also thought about sources of power. Along the way, you ended up noticing things like important quotes, how pronouns can reflect someone's group, possible symbolism, and when characters are included or excluded. All of this led us to notice all sorts of details and have a lot to say about when and how characters are more powerful and less powerful. And you also tried out a system of mapping power, a kind of process page that you could add to as you keep reading. Readers, this work is going to be fascinating in your own novels as well. As you read, be alert to details that give you insight into power in your novel. Today's assignment is going to be to create a power page as you're reading through a new novel. You're starting a new novel today. So find a spot in your notebook so that you can start documenting the systems of power and the sources of power for your novel as well. When you have a plan and you have your materials ready, go ahead and get started. Off you go, readers.